Okay, so now that I've kind of like introduced myself a little bit, I can give you a bit of a backstory. So, from the time I was about 13 years old, I'd say around the time I hit puberty, I have struggled with my mental health. My parents didn't quite understand. I frequently attempted self-harm, and I just did not want to live. At the time, I was just labeled depressed or like a teen acting out. My parents sent me to mental health hospitals where I was just put on antidepressants that actually make things so much worse for a bipolar person. And that struggle continued throughout my life. I saw mental health therapists. Nobody really, I guess, asked the right questions until I made it to the mental health therapist that I have right now. She is a saint and I love her so much. However, it took until I was in my 30s to be formally diagnosed with bipolar 1 disorder. There was a lot of relief, I guess, that came with that diagnosis, and knowing that I wasn't this horrible person. I just couldn't quite control the thoughts that were going through my brain. Like, I couldn't understand why I had periods of time where I just didn't want to live. And then periods of time where I was the happiest person in the world and nobody could tell me anything was wrong. Like, I just thought I was over the moon. I didn't realize that this was part of bipolar disorder. I would go through periods of spending tremendous amounts of money. I got my family into a lot of credit card debt because I didn't understand that I was trying to fill a void that I didn't know existed. I just thought, hey, I'm having a great time. I want to go hang out with my daughter. I want her to have the best things in the world. And I would go home that same day and feel like the worst person in the world. The high that I received from buying those things would quickly vanish. It just wasn't healthy, but nobody ever said, hey, Brittany, you might have bipolar disorder. Like, maybe you should look into that. So this destructive path just continued. Like I said, until I was in my 30s. When I was finally diagnosed with bipolar disorder and I was put on a mood stabilizer and, a medication for bipolar, it was at that time that I realized that everything I had been feeling was just not normal. For the first time in my life, I had some clarity. I had some quiet, where there was just peace in my brain, and that was not something that had happened, like I said, since I was like 13 years old. I'd been spiraling out of control and just labeled as a problem child. I was never gonna amount to anything. I was just crazy, which I know now that none of that is true. Again, the mental health medications are a lifesaver. I truly believe that I wouldn't be sitting here today if I didn't take them. But I'm also quickly learning that they don't prevent all episodes. There is no curing bipolar disorder. You can only manage it. That's what my mental health therapist tells me. She says, let's just make those highs a little less high and the lows a little less low. And so that's what we aim for. This last manic episode I had started around March, maybe a little bit sooner than that. And I still feel like I'm fighting so hard to get back to where I was. And it was because what I believe is that I thought my mood stabilizer doesn't do anything. Maybe I should try to get off of it. And that turned out to be the absolute worst thing that I could have done. It was a horrible, horrible idea. And I'm still paying for it. I wake up every day praying to God that I make it through the day, that the intrusive thoughts will go away, or that they'll be minimal, or that I can just shut them down. Some days I can. Some days I can. Some days I'm okay and I feel semi-normal. And some days I feel like I can barely move. I want you to know that it's very possible that you could be sitting in a room full of people and there's several of them that are probably struggling. And I mean really, really struggling. You never ever know what somebody's feeling. I could put on the bravest face and convince everybody in a room that I was completely fine, and at the same time be thinking my family would be so much better off without me. I know none of these things are true, but it's what your mind tells you. I created this channel because I want to get back to the best version of me that I can possibly be. I plan to exercise, which is something that I haven't been doing. Honestly, I haven't done most of my life. Not that I'm a lazy person, but exercise just hasn't really been part of something that I did. The research that I've done shows that exercise increases your endorphins, and I can use any little boost that I can get. I've been reading a bipolar disorder book that suggests that the ketogenic diet might be beneficial for a person with bipolar disorder. And honestly, I have reactive hypoglycemia anyway and should be following that diet regardless. So I really plan to give that a go. I want these videos to not only be for other people who are struggling, but for me as well. So I can look back and say, look how far you've made it. Look at everything you've accomplished. And so if you're along for that ride, let's get it. Let's do it. If this isn't for you, that's okay as well. This content isn't going to be for everyone. But for those of us who really need support and you need somebody who understands, I'm here. I'm a listening ear. We can talk about it. I would really appreciate if you would continue to follow along with me and help support me, and I'll help support you. Thanks, you guys.